Today we talk about intelligence. All of you probably had an intelligence test at least once in your life. And today we're going to talk about first, what is intelligence? What do we mean by the word intelligence? How it's measured, and to what extent is it inherited? Is it something we're born with, or is it something that we acquire? Now, intelligence has been interested by psychologists for a long time because we have an interest in measuring mental abilities. And in fact, we'll find out it's still debated about what intelligence is and how it's measured. Because it's such a complex term, people differ in what they think it really is and the best way to measure it. Robert Sternberg called intelligence a measurement-based map of the mind, because it is very much tied into how it's measured and what we measure. And Spearman was the first to talk about that we could give a lot of tests, but there's something that all these tests have in common, and that he called general intelligence, or G. In other words, if we had this test of intelligence and this test of intelligence, there was some common measurement that we could see in the fact that they were correlated with each other. John Horn and Ray Cattell took that further in saying, well, yeah, there's general intelligence, but it's best if we sort of separate crystallized intelligence from fluid intelligence. It's a GC and a GF. Fluid intelligence is those cognitive abilities that allow us to interpret the world around us, to reason, to solve problems. And crystallized intelligence are the results of those fluid abilities. In other words, what we have acquired. So things like verbal ability, vocabulary, and world knowledge, that's a part of crystallized intelligence. But the idea was we were trying to measure some general ability that allows us to interact with the environment around us. Now, Thurstone actually came up with what he called the primary mental abilities. And he used some statistical techniques called factor analysis to group together those abilities that seem to group together well. In other words, by using correlations, he would come up with empirically based factors that seemed to cling together, and he came up with his primary mental abilities. He decided there were 7 of those distinct mental abilities that we measure when we measure intelligence in an intelligence test. Those primary mental abilities are verbal comprehension, which we measure from things like a vocabulary test. Verbal fluency, how many words can you come up with a given letter, like C, in a specific period of time? Fluency. Then number, the ability to do simple arithmetic problems, mathematical problems. Space, the ability to rotate things in space. Memory, the ability to remember words and remember pictures. Inductive reasoning, things like an analogy test or a test where you complete a series, 2, 4, 6, 8, and then you say 10. Inductive reasoning. And then perceptual speed. How quickly can you perceive things and make decisions? Things like being able to cross out all the A's in a big, long matrix of letters. He believed these were the primary mental abilities that were captured in intelligence tests. And remember, intelligence tests often have many different kinds of tasks that you have to perform. Now, the most common intelligence test for children is the Stanford-Binet, one that's been around a very long time. For adults, we typically use the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, or WAIS, W-A-I-S. And you are probably familiar with the Scholastic Assessment Test. It's called the Scholastic Assessment Test. It used to be called the Scholastic Aptitude Test, but then the College Board realized that it really measures both aptitude and achievement. So it's fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. So now it's called the Scholastic Assessment Test. Now, there's certain things that all intelligence tests have in common. First, psychometric quality. if you take a test and then take the test again a week later, you should pretty much get the same score. That's called reliability. How reliable is that measure of intelligence? We also have validity. Is it really measuring what we say it's measuring? Now, there's several kinds of validity. You can have construct validity or content validity, which says it's measuring the same thing that other commonly used intelligence test measures. So if I develop an intelligence test and it correlates highly with the WACE or the Stanford-Binet, then I would say it has content or construct validity. It can also have predictive validity. For example, the SAT that you take as an admission requirement for colleges correlates well with performance in the first year of college. So it has predictive validity. It predicts well how you're going to do in your freshman year. And then there's face validity. That is you really understand what it's measuring while it's measuring it. Intelligence tests are pretty face valid, but some personality tests are not, because they don't want you to really know what it's measuring. Now also, most intelligence tests are standardized. That is, we give the test to lots of people so we know what does an average 7-year-old do on the Stanford-Binet? What does an average 10-year-old do on the Stanford-Binet? So it's standardized by knowing what the average score is, and so we have norms based on samples of the population. For example, IQ, which is a measure, is determined by your mental age divided by your chronological age times 100. Mental age is what your score is in the standardization norms. You might be a 9-year-old, but in fact, your mental age is of a 12-year-old, according to the standardization norms. If your mental age is the same as your chronological age, then your score is going to be 100. So the average score on an intelligence test, like the WACE, for example, is 100, because the mental age divided by the chronological age gives you 1, and times 100 gives that. If your mental age is higher than your chronological age, then your IQ is going to be higher than 100. So this is a measure of intelligence that's based on standardization norms. Now, this is a bell-shaped curve, or a normal distribution, which you find if you give the intelligence test to lots of people. And it shows first what the average is. In this case, the average, according to the IQ, is 100, which means your mental age and your chronological age are the same. And if your mental age is higher than your chronological age, then you're going to be distributed with a higher IQ score. And if it's lower than the chronological age, you'll have a IQ score that's lower. It also measures this distribution, only shows the average, but it also shows how distributed the scores are around the average. If the scores are very close to the mean, then this will be a very narrow distribution. And if the scores are very widely around the mean, then it'll be distributed in a larger one. But this particular distribution has a score that is a distribution of 15, and that's called a standard deviation. Now, one standard deviation in IQ score, standard deviation is 15, is 34% of the distribution. That means that 68% of the distribution is around the mean. 68% is one standard deviation below and above the mean. If you go between 1 and 2 standard deviations, it's another 14%. That means that 96% of the variance occurs between 2 standard deviations above and below the mean. This just tells you what the score is. So if you score 130, that means you're in the 96% and you're at the high end of that. So as you can see, the measurement of intelligence is really that's why Sternberg called it a measurement-based map of the mind. Now, there are 2 contemporary theories I want to briefly mention. There's Gardner's multiple intelligences. It says you can't talk about intelligence as G. Intelligence is different depending on what the particular trait is that you're trying to look at. And then I'd like to talk about Sternberg's triarctic theory of intelligence. Now, Howard Gardner said that there are different kinds of intelligence. There's linguistic intelligence, verbal base. There's logico-mathematical, spatial, musical, kinesthetic, interpersonal, how we deal with each other effectively, and intrapersonal, how we understand our own self. And he points out that you really can't talk about intelligence being one thing because people can have very high in one of these and very low in another. For example, they're autistic savants, people that have very low intelligence scores, but they have particular talents like high musical ability. You think of Rain Man, the movie, for example. The person had amazing ability to deal with logico-mathematical things, but overall the intelligence was pretty low. So intelligence is depending upon what particular expertise you want to deal with. And I didn't pick my last one here, naturalistic, the sort of idea of understanding what the animals are and the trees and plants are. Particular talent, particular kind of intelligent behavior. Robert Sternberg says there are three kinds of intelligence, and so far we've only been talking about analytic intelligence, what the Stanford Binet and the WAIS measure. But there's also creative intelligence, the ability to innovate and come up with new things, and then practical intelligence, the ability to know what you do in everyday life. So there are three kinds, practical, analytic, and creative, and you have to measure those differently. For example, in analytic intelligence that we've been talking about with the most intelligence tests, it's how to analyze things, how to compare, how to evaluate. But creative intelligence is how to create, invent, and design. And practical intelligence is how to apply, use, and do, how we do things. Well, that's it for intelligence. Thank you.